Listen to the vibes.
The views and opinions of our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the host or the Vibes Broadcast Network. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. And I have here Mr. Mikolaj Raszek. Okay, I think I got it that time. And anyway, he deals with DNA. I think you do like sequencing, and you find out when people are having medical problems and other issues before they have any symptoms or anything.
Or after.
Okay. And well, first, just tell us a little bit about you.
So I have a degree in genetics, but I also have a doctorate in biochemistry, which is great because they're related fields, they're sister fields, and that gave me basically an opportunity to develop good understanding of molecular biology. If you study molecular biology, you realize that eventually everything is steered somehow to medicine. And it was through my doctorate degree that I got into sequencing. And that was also when the next generation sequencing technology came out, which is the technology that finally facilitated the ability to decode human genomes. And now anyone can decode their genome. It's at a grasp of anyone who has a few $1,000s at their disposal, depending on what kind of technology you're going after. If you want to go the best of the best, it's going to be a bit more.
But since you're on my show, I get it for free, right?
Discount.
So,
because I don't actually do the sequencing, I'm the facilitator. So I connect the variety of different companies together in order to bring medical DNA testing to privately to people that want it or need it, or to clinics that might be interested in setting it up. So we don't actually do the sequencing. We coordinate different laboratories, and there's different technologies. So this is an easier method to do it, and then trying to have your own lab, because each one of these machines that decode human genome, it can be upwards to $1 million, and they continuously are reinvented to be better and faster, or to develop or provide cheaper sequence and so on.
and you find all kinds of cancers and prenatal stuff.
So it depends on where you're looking, right? So it depends on who is your basically client. So if it were to be you and I, we're presumed to be healthy, right? We don't seem to have outward symptoms, right? And then we would be finding something different than someone who already has symptoms. So the way I divide people who get to do DNA testing, I divide them into presumed healthy, like you and I, people with cancer or cancer history, and pregnant women, because then they can investigate the prenatal information, as you mentioned, and then people with undiagnosed diseases or undiagnosed conditions. So those are individuals who actually have symptoms, have issues, medical issues, but the medical system cannot actually pinpoint what the problem is. And that's where the genetic testing can become extremely valuable, because approximately 50% of the time, or better, depending on the company, you find out the genetic roots of a condition. And the reason why it can be so difficult to pinpoint an actual problem is because of the fact that so many diseases might have overlapping symptoms. There might be actual tests available to pinpoint or diagnose what the issue is, but one might not know as to what test to run. And I apologize about the incessant beeping in the background.
Hey, you're working in a lab, so it's to be expected.
I wasn't able to escape in time today, so my apologies. I was working on experiments till the moment we started.
Well,
that basically, I'm sorry, that just simply how I would differentiate different people. Depending on who you target, you expect to be finding different results.
Okay. Well, I was going to say that, I'm not very knowledgeable in all this stuff, but I'm assuming that you can at least eliminate most things by doing these tests. So even if you haven't pinpointed what a problem might be, you at least can say this is definitely not this.
Sometimes, yes, indeed. So depends on what you investigate. You can either, if you have symptoms and it's undiagnosed condition, or you have a rare disease, so one of those diseases that afflict less than 1 in 10,000 individuals, then you could eliminate conditions because of the fact that you looked at specific genes, or vice versa. You can find causative mutations in specific genes. It might not necessarily provide cure. That's actually rare, but once you diagnose a condition, it might help such people, for example, with handling the symptoms, right? And it might help such individuals with the reproductive planning. Of course, having an intervention is always the best, right? Because we all wish to be healthy, as healthy as possible for as long as possible.
Of course. No, I guess what you do could someday lead to cures, though, right?
Yes, definitely. And that's where genetics actually is big, because of the fact that as we start linking specific genes to specific conditions, then this helps to identify, hey, what in molecular biology is actually broken in relation to a given disease. And once you know what to target, because you know what is broken in the body, then you can start thinking, hey, we could develop specific drugs to target this specific molecule to fix a problem. So that for sure we will be developing more and more cures the more we understand the genetic roots of different diseases. Now, of course, not all diseases or not all conditions are based on genetics. There's also environmental issues. You can have an infection, right? But we're strictly speaking when it comes to genetic diseases. But once you know what's broken, then it gives you that window of opportunity to perhaps start developing treatments. Yeah.
So do you believe you're going to find the cure for cancer?
Personally, no. The reason why is because I facilitate the testing, right? But
I mean,
also
what you
don't
do.
think, when you say find a cure for cancer, what needs to be understood that every single person who has cancer, they have an individualized disease. They have individualized personal cancer. So not a single cancer is the same. So to find a cure for cancer holistically as a whole would be next to impossible, because you end up having thousands and thousands of different cancer types. So we can find cures for potentially specific type of cancer, and it's very, very challenging. Cancer is a challenging disease. I understand that a lot of the public thinks, when they think of cancer, they might think of one set of disease and that's it, but it's not. Honestly, it's like, think of a cancer like an individual fingerprint. And the reason why is because what is cancer is your own genome that you were born with, meaning your DNA you were born with, mutated to a specific degree, so that the cells that have this mutated DNA can now divide uncontrollably. So then you can appreciate that if a person has a cancer, well, it comes from their own genome, and every single person has a unique genome. So every single cancer, in theory, is also unique. This is one of the reasons why it's so difficult to fight cancer, because we are dealing with individual or personalized diseases here.
Well, I guess the most simplest way I could say, it's basically the body attacking itself, or the cells attacking itself.
Yeah, in a way, what happens is you accidentally create like a evil twin inside yourself. So, and that will eventually, or runs the risk of potentially destroying the rest of the organism, because of the fact that it will start eating up valuable resources and potentially destroying its surrounding environment. Cancer doesn't, of course, mean automatic death sentence. And over the decades, we've learned to deal with cancer more and more. So some cancers are almost considered curable, because the treatment success of treatment is so high that you could almost think it's curable. Breast cancer is a good example. Of course, there are people who die of breast cancer, women who die of breast cancer, but luckily the vast majority have a very high chance of survival these days in comparison to, say, even go back 20 years ago, the death rate would have been so much higher than what we're dealing with right now. Another good example would be prostate cancer. And the slivers of cancers in these two categories that are still deadly, that actually is dependent on the genetics of cancer. So what was actually mutated inside there to drive that cancer, that is now the main differentiating factor. So these days, you don't necessarily look at the tissue origin just alone in terms of how you're supposed to be fighting cancer. It's quite paramount to look at the genetic source of what was it that contributed to that development of cancer.
Yeah, I'm at that age where, you know, get the test.
Well, if you're a man, it's we all have it eventually. It's coming. So, but hey, better that than a surprise cancer, right?
That's
For
true.
sure.
That's true. Yeah, I had a scare earlier this year because they found a spot on my lung, but they want me to come back next year to check it again. But especially when you get up in your 50s and 60s, you start thinking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, their aging is we can't cheat it, not yet, at least, right? We might in the future, perhaps genetically, maybe, because aging is simply programmed in our system, right? It's genetically programmed in us, and so that we age, but we can't escape it right now. We all have to face the reality. This is why I always feel, hey, enjoy your life to the fullest extent, because it's finite, it's limited. And let's be honest, the last 10% of our life, or give or a few percent to 10%, it's, we're sick. It might be miserable at that stage, right? Right now, when we're still vigorous and robust, let's enjoy it to the max.
Well, unfortunately, I'm past that point. I have a disease, it's degenerative disease in my spine, and it's tearing up bone, and it's also eating away at my my discs. So it's been one surgery after another, and going to the doctor every month and experimenting with this drug and that drug, and it's frustrating, but I'm hoping that one day they're able to stop this kind of stuff. And I personally want to just leave my body to science. So if they can use it, if they can find a cure or anything, use it. I mean, what am I going to use my body for? I'm not done with it, right?
And that's how we move forward, honestly, right? Your condition you're describing, for example, as tragic as it is, go back 100 years ago, perhaps you wouldn't be alive anymore, already at this age. And so that's how we progress. We move forward all the time. You also might be a good candidate for genetic testing, actually, right? Especially for medications, pharmacogenetic testing, depending on what kind of medications you take.
Mm-hmm.
And then, leading super healthy lifestyle so that you can improve your immune system to the best degree.
I do eat a lot better than what I did when I was younger. I'll say that.
Same. I learned.
From what I understand, it's something that happens to people with diabetes. It's, a rare thing, but it happens. And plus the nerve pain and all the other things. But I've used my body a lot when I was younger. And not eating right, too much drinking. I used to do a lot of drugs and, jumping out of stuff, second story windows, and, just all the stupid things that I did when I was a kid. I thought I could live forever, excuse me. And I was Superman, and you find out you're not quite as Superman as you think you are.
I did a lot of crazy stuff too. Boys will be boys. Looking back, I willfully endanger my life on many occasions, but I wouldn't have seen it like that back then. And of course, I see it now because I still do high impact sports, and you can tell like your body does not recover anywhere that it used to be. So I have to be much more careful because getting injured right now, you're out for weeks as opposed to a few days, right? Yeah, absolutely. It's nothing we can do. That's just the reality. We will age and will deteriorate, and that will be different from person to person. Absolutely.
Yeah, I walk
In
for
your
10
case,
minutes, just 10 minutes of walking, and I'm down for almost 3 days. That's how bad it gets. It sucks. Otherwise, I have to use a wheelchair.
Yeah, you might have some musculature condition or some sort of autoimmune disease. Who knows? I presume, of course, you've looked into it in depth, obviously by now.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
But clearly, I wish you all the best, right? I
appreciate it. I appreciate it.
It's not a position anyone really would want to be. So kudos on you for persisting and still being here and laughing together, and enjoying yourself to the max. Right on.
Well,
inspirational.
You can pout or you can just give up and vegetate, but it just made me pursue something else. I can't work anymore, but that doesn't mean that I have to lay on the couch and just watch TV all day. You know what I mean? I like doing this. I like talking to people, and I share my story not for anybody to give me sympathy. It's just that I know there's somebody out there that could be watching this or listening to it, and their ears will perk up because they'll say, wait, that's what I have. That's what I go through. And I want to get them any kind of help they can get. And then I bring people like you on who have alternate ways of, hey, this is how you can find out what may be wrong with you. And maybe somebody be a part of the cure one day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a small incremental buildup of knowledge that eventually leads to new solutions. For sure. It's a never-ending progress, right? We're constantly improving. That's the beauty of life in general, because obviously our life has a limit, right? But that life automatically contributes to the benefit of those lives in the future, just like our ancestors, whatever they had to go through, they didn't have our privileges. And yet it's thanks to them that we currently have our privileges of our lives and so on. So it's all working together in unison. It's the way I see it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you said you were kind of wild in your younger days, and surely you didn't always dream of doing this. When did you decide this is what you wanted to get into?
I actually, believe it or not, I was an artist to start with.
Okay.
And so this is a bit of a switch. I'm pretty good at drawing and painting, and that's where I thought, okay, let's go with that talent. But it was in high school that I decided to switch to sciences, and then I pursued it ever since. When it comes to genetics, well, I did genetics degree in the 90s. It was still like a exploding field at the time. So it just seemed really interesting, the whole idea that you actually have a program code that runs you. It's just really fascinating. Of course, in the 90s, there was no human genome at the time yet uncovered. It was only in a fantasy stages, in the preliminary stages, because the whole process started probably in mid 90s, late 90s, give or take. But slowly it started adding up. Once I did my biochemistry degree, my doctorate degree, and the new technology came out, eventually you have to decide, hey, what do I want to do with my life, right? And I really wanted to do something. Ultimately, you have to do something that pleases you. I think there's no point in having a job you hate or you're miserable about, in my opinion. So unless you're trading it for another form of energy, such as money, right? Then sure, kudos, go for it. But I think make sure this is a healthy exchange, in my opinion. So I wanted to make sure I build a career in something that I'll be passionate about and I'll be interested in about, and that I could work for the rest of my life in. And this is it. It's been years since I've been developing my business. It took me years to actually learn it first. I literally, I unemployed myself for 4 years where I didn't work, period. I literally just studied. I created my own, like a second doctorate degree, and I studied everything in scientific literature I could find in relation to how can one bring medical DNA testing privately to a person who would be interested, and what would be the rules behind it, the criteria. I started from zero knowledge. Of course, I had my genetics background, but that's not the same as creating a business and, hey, here's how you can get a medical DNA test, right? So, and it took me a long time. One of the reasons why is because it took me a long time to overcome my fear of facing medical doctors and telling them and teaching them about medical DNA testing. I had to feel super confident before I was able to basically face that challenge or face those fears. And it took a while. I basically made sure I knew almost everything. Yeah, so right now it's a passion and I still love it. So I know this was a correct choice. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, you had to walk in like a boss and say, this is how it goes.
Yeah, I can definitely hold my ground when it comes to genetic conversations. Now, of course, there are people who, it's a very large field. It's a universe of its own. So you can continuously micro specialize in different areas. But I have a very good broad knowledge, so that if someone needs medical DNA testing, I can definitely help. Like that part, to be able to steer you into the right direction. Yeah, we got that covered by now.
And where'd you
and
say
all the little aspects of what it means to go through medical DNA testing.
where'd you say you went to school?
At the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. It's one of the
Okay.
western provinces in Canada. Sorry, I'm not sure where you're located, hence you might be in Edmonton as well.
I'm just outside Austin, Texas.
Okay. So
You're one of our northern neighbors then.
we are your copycat of Canada. Literally, right? Alberta is the cowboy culture of Canada, 100%. So beef is one of the biggest industries here, and Calgary Stampede is one of the largest festivals in the world, and it's all cowboy culture. It's a lot of fun. If you've never been, whoever is listening, worth checking out once in a lifetime, for sure.
Well, hopefully one day we'll be able to travel back and forth a lot easier than what it is now.
I hope so too, right? There's Canada has some ridiculous restrictions right now. Unfortunately, we are still segregating our society based on vaccination status, which is very bizarre to me because it makes no sense from a scientific point of view. But I don't make the rules.
Yeah, that's a whole other show in itself, isn't it?
Right. And I do have a lot of background in that as well, because I have my own business with the medical DNA testing, Merogenomics, but I also work part-time in another business, which I'm also was co-founder of, where we're developing a platform, another platform for COVID-19 testing. Now it's a platform we're using COVID-19 as a showcase. The point of what we're doing is that you can exchange it for any pathogen testing type of thing. But so I have a lot of background on COVID-19, and I have an extremely successful YouTube channel on COVID-19 science, and with a specific focus on vaccines. I'm very interested in the mRNA vaccines that most of the world was vaccinated with. And the reason why is because this is the technology that I believe that once we perfect it, I don't think we've perfected it at all because it's too new. That's always what happens. You eventually need to get it better and better. And I do believe we're gonna only get better and better with it. But I hope that in the future we can use this technology to in fact treat some of the human genetic diseases.
Oh wow. Yeah, I'm with you. I think that this went out way too soon. I don't think it was enough testing done, and
Well,
I'd
because
just
we
say,
dealt with emergency, right? So it was, what do we
yeah,
do? It's like you take one risk or the other, and time will tell what would have been, whether what we did was smart or not, and whether the risk was worth taking or not. And the reason why I say time will tell is because, of course, we still have to wait for the long-term consequences,
yeah,
long-term side effects that might be coming in due to vaccination, which hopefully there won't be any, or not any, right? Like, that's not realistic. Let's be realistic. There's always some long-term consequences, and you can probably assign that to any vaccine. And the reason why is because human biology is so extremely diverse. You will always find small amount of population where there will be a, let's call it biological clash, right? But we're looking for the vast majority of being unaffected, and of course that we can still hope for.
yeah. And I have to stress, unfortunately, that I'm not advocating for or against it. You make your own decisions. Everybody decide for yourself, but
Same,
I do know
same.
someone that works in an office, and there's only a select few that actually got the vaccinations. And the only ones that have gotten sick are the ones that have gotten the vaccinations. The rest of them are fine. I don't understand it, but it's
Yeah,
another conversation, right?
yeah, it would be another conversation. There might be biological explanation for that, and unfortunately, yeah, there might be some limitations that vaccination might be now causing, because of the fact that we have now immune escape variants, right? So the variants that actually bypass the vaccinal antibodies, the virus has managed to evolve so rapidly. It's astonishing. It's astonishing how quickly it evolved
It's crazy. Well,
and
um,
continues to evolve.
so what's the name of your YouTube channel?
It's same as the business, because I started the YouTube channel on DNA testing, but very few people wanted to watch this. When it came to COVID, the amount of attention was magnitude higher, and so it's still Merogenomics, MERO genomics with an S at the end, and
Okay.
yeah, we got still over 100,000 subscribers, and
Wow.
get a lot of praise. And the reason why is because the channel is dedicated to talking about published scientific information, not opinions. Of course, everyone's opinionated, right? Well,
Of
let's not
course.
pretend we all will always carry natural amount of bias, right? But the goal is here is not to be for one area or the other. Here's what science shows us, whether it's correct or not, because that's another thing we need to understand, is that just because science was published, that doesn't mean it's correct. And sometimes we do that on purpose, because we want to stimulate further research and investigation. So that means we publish information that appear to show correlation, but that doesn't mean it's causative. So that means the correlation might be inaccurate. We still want to publish that information precisely so that we can then do more research and find out, is it a correlation or is it not? So you can almost always find pro and against information in science for any argument you want. So if anyone tells you, hey, this is what the science says, the question is, which science? Because you will always find both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
And the way science works is that you need to accumulate and amass huge amount of information before you can feel with a very high level of confidence that what you actually seeing is correct and true. Very easy to mislead yourself. And also science is very complex, very complicated when you're dealing with molecular biology. There's so many moving pieces to it. It's easy to misjudge what the results might be showing. It's easy to forget about certain controls that would potentially negate your result. So science is really, really hard and complicated.
Well,
So it takes a slow and long time before we really get to the bottom of things.
it changes and evolves all the time. I mean, you
All
look
the
at
time.
one point, they thought that the earth was the center of the universe, and they thought that the earth was flat. And all of a sudden, boom, it's not the, you know, it's the sun, and it's, you know, the earth is round, and I, you
That's right. And
look at the architecture from way back when to the way it is now, and what all the things we can build. I mean, it's always changing. It's not always absolute.
exactly. And that's exactly how science is. It's never absolute. By the time something becomes absolute in science, then it becomes a dogma, and it takes a long time and incredible amount of evidence before something becomes dogmatic, such as the fact that DNA is our genetic material, right? That is the program code that runs it. That wasn't certain at some point either. It was believed that inheritance information might have come from proteins, right? Something else. It took a while to discover and prove it eventually. So that's just how it works. So feeding science and saying, hey, this is science, so you have to do this according to science. Well, again, my question is, how much science has been accumulated so that we can be certain that it's even correct? So always be skeptical about science, but always be curious about science.
Exactly. Stick with it. I mean, who knows? You know, one of our grandkids may be finding discoveries that we would have never dreamed of.
Let's hope so. Exactly. And I'm sure that, I mean, we will. It's a never-ending world of investigation. The moment you uncover something, you only discover that there's more to uncover, because you just open new doors of inquiry. It's never-ending story.
Mhm. So, what's your website?
Also Merogenomics.ca. So MERO genomics with an S at the end.ca. And it's a good website if anyone is considering medical DNA testing. I think it's a great source. I built it on purpose so that people can be prepared for this type of process. You can go to the procedure tab, and you can learn basically all of the information that one should consider investigating prior to medical DNA testing, because there are some things that people might not even think off the top of their head, such as, like, if you decide to do your full genome,
Mhm.
and say you were to find out you have some cancer predisposition or some really scary disease predisposition, well, not everyone in your family might want to know that, because they might not want to stress whether then they have similar predisposition, right? So it's little things like that that one should think about, and what are the different considerations. Full gene, or getting your DNA investigated, is not a trivial process, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. One should take a lot of thinking about it. I also think, of course, everyone should do it if you can afford it, because it's your biological blueprint. But that's not for everyone, and I fully understand that. If you are someone who is at a high risk of stressing very easy, full genome sequencing or DNA testing might not be for you, at least for just screening purposes, meaning, oh, you're just investigating. Of course, if you have a already condition, then it might be very, very valuable. Sometimes it can be life-saving.
Right. So somebody here in Texas can get a test done and send it to you, and somebody, say, in the UK, could send you a sample and you can test it.
Right now, the way we set it up is that we are actually working with local doctors. So there,
Mhm.
because these are medical DNA tests, there is a doctor supervision
Mhm.
involved automatically, which means basically right now we'd be processing Canadian patients. Now, people outside of Canada, what we would have to do is something different, which still could be done for sure, 100%. But then we would have to connect you directly to the company, and then start working with your own doctor in your own jurisdiction that is outside of Canada. So it would be more of a company taking care of business, as opposed to myself. Besides, of course, facilitating the connections, which is not trivial sometimes. So right now we're building a new program for new full genome sequencing, it literally, we bring at least 3 different companies just to bring this single service to you. So you can see it's not just like you go to one business and boom, everything is available to you. So, and we're also right now in a process of building services that I'm not even sure if they're even commercially available yet. And again, it needs multiple players in order for a person to get the full genome sequencing done. So besides that, we also make sure that you as a client, we make sure that you don't make any mistakes when you fill out the forms and when you provide the sample. So we basically hold your hand through the process to make sure it's done correct and you don't have to stress. So that's another aspect of Merogenomics that we provide. And if you go to the parent company directly, yeah, you wouldn't be dealing with that anymore. And again, like as I mentioned, some of these services, unless you go through us, you might not be able to get it, or at least I would even know. So right now we're looking at trying to offer full genome sequencing using what is referred to as long read technology. So what I mean by that is when you decode your genome, your DNA, so genome is your entirety of your DNA. What you need to do first, you need to cut it up into fragments, and then you read those fragments all together at the same time. Then computer programs splice it back together using a reference. Now, 99% of all genomes in the world are used using short read technology. That means basically your genome is cut up into millions of tiny, puny little fragments. But you can see computationally it can be very challenging to put it back together. You absolutely need a reference to do it. There's another way to do it where you can read giant fragments of your DNA, like absolutely enormous in size. And then they're so big that you don't even need a reference to compare to put it back together. So this way you get the most accurate information possible. But that technology is very expensive at the moment. And hence I'm not even aware if it's anywhere commercially available. I imagine somewhere it is, but I'm not sure, to be honest, and I'm in this world. But most of the time it's used for research purposes. Or if you're sequencing new species that has never been decoded, its genetics have never been decoded, then you need to employ that technology because, again, you don't have that reference to compare.
Uh-oh. What happened?
To. So, and just to complete the story, last year, only last year did we finally complete the human genome. So I know everyone has heard probably that human genome was decoded 20 years ago. Well, almost. It was few percent were missing. And the reason why those few percent were missing is because the technology could not decode it. Now using this technology of those super long reads, scientists were finally able to put it back together. So we know finally what the entire human genome actually looks like. Prior to that, we were missing maybe about 8% or so. So yeah, you can see putting together this type of service. Yeah, you might have a very hard time to be able to get it somewhere else. Well, we haven't put it together yet. We're putting it together now. That's been my long time dream, fantasy to actually bring that commercially to the public. But it's going to be expensive. But it's going to be the best one can possibly have. And also the technology is so robust, and because these fragments that are being decoded are so large, it's there's not going to be any massive leap of technology any soon that would substantially replace this quality. Not anytime soon. Like the fragments might get longer over time, which always will make it easier and easier to put your genome back together, but they're already giant. They're one fragment can be bigger than the entire coronavirus genome itself. You know, so that's how big these are. Although that might not tell you much.
So if we find aliens, you'll be the guy to check their DNA?
We'd have plenty of scientists and that would be able to start studying that information for sure. Yeah.
You want to be the first in line though, right?
If yeah, for sure. If someone was like, hey, here's an alien sample, then I would definitely be interested in looking into that. Or another one that I think would be fun to consider is trying to put together genomes of famous people who are no longer around by looking at the ancestors, for example. So you might have heard or not, there was an attempt, I don't know if it ever succeeded, of trying to decode Leonardo da Vinci's genome by looking at the descendants of the family. So clearly there must have been genealogical records that allowed to track who those individuals are. I don't know if genetic sample of Leonardo da Vinci was actually isolated, but DNA can last for a very long time if it's preserved correctly.
So, is there any specific type of sample that you need to do this, or
the two most common that are being used, if you're just investigating and it's not cancer related, then blood or saliva. Now, blood is better because it's cleaner. Saliva is one of the dirtiest parts of your body in terms of bacterial infection, or not infection, that's not a right word, coexistence, cohabitation, because bacteria are everywhere, right, on our body. Most of our body, as I'm sitting in front of you, is actually bacteria, not human cells. And so taking blood is clean, mouth will be very dirty. You can still get enough material to actually get human genome, no problem. But along the way, you're gonna get the decode the microbiota as well from saliva. If you want clean sample, which always can increase statistical significance of calling the mutations correctly, then you go with blood. And there's other samples, of course, one can test. You can test tissue samples, and most common one would be cancer biopsy. That's exactly what you need if you want to determine what has mutated in your genome to drive the cancer development. You actually need to test the biopsy itself. And even that has layers of complexity, because cancer, on top of, we're talking about cancer, on top of cancer, if you think of, let's say the fist is cancer, and sometimes can get that big, right? Then within that cancer tissue will be sub-tissues. You can almost think like it will have its own little separate organs. So there will be different areas of that cancer that will be different, genetically different from one another, and they will behave differently and act differently. So once again, you can see how complex cancer can be. Right now, we have this shotgun approach, and imagine how much more, meaning we take the biopsy and you homogenize it, and then you look at the genetics. So you don't know whether the genetics came from this segment of cancer or that segment. Right now, we can actually do this, where you can actually test entire sample individually. You can test the genome of every single individual cancer cell in the cancer sample. But this is brand new technology, very expensive, very laborious. Normally, you test everything together, and then you see in that entire pool of different cancer cells, what are the driver mutations. But some of these driver mutations might be only in a fragment of the cancer, and some other driver mutation might be in a bigger fragment. Then imagine, even prior to genetic testing, how little information sometimes we have to go by in trying to treat such a complex disease. Right now, we have more and more medications, treatments for cancer based on cancer genetics. So, and these are called targeted therapies. So you can see basically DNA sequencing or decoding the DNA of cancer has absolutely revolutionized cancer field. It has revolutionized almost every aspect of medicine, but cancer is a huge one. It's a big one. It's probably also where the most DNA decoding takes place in medicine, is in a cancer space.
Wow. I can think of about another 20, 30 questions to ask you, but unfortunately we're run out of time. We got your YouTube channel. We got your website. Are you on social media?
Social media, same handle, Merogenomics, The only other thing I can maybe quickly plug in is that I got together with a couple other experts and we built a program for employees. So this for business owners that would be interested in providing this to their employees, because it's a proactive well-being program where we provide multiple week-long seminars that teach about how to best tackle financial well-being, mental health well-being, and then physical well-being, which is my area, with of course the twist of DNA testing. And we thought that this is something unique, that you can try this more of a holistic approach to, well, basically function at your best.
And do you do that like over Zoom?
Yes, that's right. Not yet in person. Clearly, we want to do it in person.
I understand.
Who doesn't, right? Who doesn't?
I totally understand. Well, I'm going to put these links up in the description so people can click on it and go to it.
Let me tell you the link to that one. That one is called that one is easy. moneymindDNA.ca. Three experts. moneymindDNA.ca, and then you can register to one of our seminars that teach you about what it is that we bring to the table, and then you decide whether you want to participate and purchase the program or not.
Oh, cool. I'll pass that along, but I say I'll put those links in the description so people can just click on it and go to it, and they don't have to remember. But
exactly.
I'm that way. 5 minutes later, I've already forgotten. But
same.
But I want to thank you.
I can rewatch same movies over and over.
Right. But no, seriously, thank you for stopping by and for giving me your time. And I want to thank everyone out there. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe, and I appreciate you stopping by. For those of you who are regular, thank you for your support. It's because of you that we do what we do. So until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network